So, welcome everyone to the session Why Foreign Startups Rarely Win in China and How You Can. I hope that we can make through this content and future activities more of you win and succeed in startup competitions. From the marketing materials, you could expect that there are no founders, no foreign founders that actually win. However, this is the data from last year, and I want to show you where usually winners come from that we refer. You have on the left an application pool of around 5 to 6,000 startups, and there you see the different regions where they come from. One of the strongest is definitely Africa and Asia and Oceania. Asia, because of India, there's a big proportion of startups coming from there. When you look at the winners that we refer, the proportion is very different. Europe takes a way bigger proportion, North America and Asia, of course, as well. But Africa is, of course, very little compared to the amount of applications coming in. South America is one of the few where you have more winners, actually. There are definitely foreign startups, and we've seen them and we supported them through the end in terms of winning and claiming prizes and registering also in China. This one, if you have ever been to a startup competition in China and you watch the summit, you first have the impression it's very international because they have all these government officials on the stage talking about international collaboration. I mean, with that, international embassy representatives or corporates, foreign faces. But then when you look at the winners and the winner announcements, it usually looks like this. So you have 90% of the founders that win and are on stage are Chinese. And you have very rarely foreign faces. I would say that the majority of startup competitions that we support are like this. We have some that are a little bit better, where you have maybe 4 or 5 foreign faces on this slide, but some of them have none, but they still are international startup competitions. Now, this has a couple of reasons. I will go into them. But one thing I also want to highlight here, there are many of them who hold foreign passports. So it could be that some of them are American, German, French. This is one of the reasons. And others I will share in a bit. This is not by design that they are discriminating foreigners. It's actually because of many of the framework points of the result of the system, because of the judges, because of what kind of foreign startups apply here, and certain aspects of trust that are also culturally based that I will dive into in a bit. As a rough estimation, you can usually say that around 5% of winners at Chinese startup competitions have a foreign face. So why there are so few foreigners? One is that the competitions itself is also not really experienced in receiving foreigners, because they usually make minor proportion of the applicants, and the entire judging value stream is usually entirely Chinese. And even though they understand English, they have rarely to do with foreign founders, and they do not know how to read Chinese and English application of a foreign founder. This one I want to highlight because it's from Startup Genome, and one of the few important data insights you get from this is looking at the top 20 global startup ecosystems. Most of them are comparable, but the one thing where China differs from other countries is if you look at Beijing and Shanghai, there is a little one, a white one at connectedness. And this one is because they interview founders in China and they ask them, what other founders do you know? In which countries do they come from? And if you interview a Chinese founder and they say, I only know Chinese, then this number becomes smaller and smaller. And China is a market where everything is kind of Chinese. So there are no foreign founders. This is the one number, the one difference that you see between the ecosystems, because Silicon Valley is quite international. New York is super international, and London and so on and so on. But China and Beijing and Shanghai is in this regard not. And one of the reasons here is the amount of foreign population. So that's also one of the results why there are so few foreigners in the competitions, because there are only 0.05% of foreigners in the population. So there is not much room for exchange. Still, if you live in Shanghai or Beijing, you sometimes are under the impression everything is international, but those are just core centers of foreigners. And if you go to second-tier cities like Chengdu or so on, you will not really see that much of foreigners. Here, something shows the different nationalities. Why is Myanmar and Vietnam so high? Because of the border proximity. Because you have usually migrant workers coming over, and this is why this is so high. That was before COVID not as high. So you had other nationalities like South Korea or Germany representing way more, but this has changed since COVID. And you see the dip here in 2020 because of COVID, and it has not recovered since. The only regions that are recovering are usually outside of Europe and outside of the US. Southeast Asia or Africa or South America, they are now increasingly coming to China. Now, when there are not so many foreign winners at the startup competitions, but they all call themselves global startup competition or international startup competition, what is actually their focus? What do they want? One of the main focuses all of them have is they want to attract returnee Chinese. No matter if they are first, second, third generation of Chinese, but they have like the largest campaign to return foreign talent that are IP holders, technology holders. That's their purpose. Attracting foreign talent in this regard is actually, they want this, but they are not good at it because they are really bad at identifying and then securing them also. I'll talk about this. There's a little difference between getting applicants that are good and that actually land at the end. The last one that is actually tick, tick, tick for you have a overseas returnee Chinese that has an American passport, and ideally they are also part of a leading global technology company. This is what they want to look for. But the smallest part that probably some of you will take is to be a leading global technology company that has something that China has not yet. But this is also one of the 3 pillars of what the competitions usually want. One of the biggest learnings I think we had in the last 2 years, looking at thousands of applications, is a mismatch of expectations. You've seen probably in the application process that we ask you things like, for what kind of winning price would you land in China? So we ask like 200,000, a million, 2 million RMB. We do this because we want to find a way to identify who has the right expectations. When you look at the spider chart on the right, usually what the competitions want is a whole 10 of everything. So they want a company with China relevance. So something that is extremely relevant for industry or trade or security. They want a technology relevance. They want the talent background. So ideally, they want a PhD from Stanford. They want that the companies already have 20 paying clients in China. They want that you have already $3 million US in revenue every year, 10 million US dollar in funding, and a Chinese founder. So this is the thing that they are looking for. And usually when you see first prize or the grand prize of a competition goes to companies that have this, all of this. We have not seen a foreign startup yet that ticks all of these boxes, but we have seen startups that are in the pink space. These are outstanding foreign startups. They can have a foreign founder or a Chinese one. That is not as important actually, but they have substantial funding. They have substantial revenue. They have China traction because they sometimes have operations already here. They have good talent background. So they're usually master or PhD in a certain technology field. And they have also China relevance and technology relevance. We work with them and we have actually a good handful of startups in this area that land. And those can have the expectations of, I want to win 1 million, 1.5 million in terms of winning price. But for this, you need to meet certain expectations already before. Otherwise, you will not even reach that. The great foreign startups, you don't need for that a Chinese founder. Talent is always a high priority. If you have a bachelor degree, but you have the perfect company, you will have nearly no chance of winning anything in most of the Chinese competitions because the talent angle is extremely important. China traction is also, you see, even for the ones that are 200,000, you should have some China traction. You should be able to already have some letter of intents or clients visited China a couple of times. Otherwise, you will not be considered because you're not taken serious in this regard. And one thing, I write that here, that 80% of the startups that apply usually to Chinese competitions, they do not even qualify as a good startup because they don't have these things. But some of them that qualify as good startup or better, they are presenting themselves wrong. So they miss out the way how they present themselves better. Just in last year, we had, I would say, 5 or 6 companies where we actively interviewed them and got the information out and created slides for them that they could win. Otherwise, they would not have even been considered to go forward. And this is an important thing, that you also do a reality check. Where am I in all of this? Are my expectations correct? Do I want 2 million RMB, but I have no revenue? Then you're probably at the wrong place. I list a few things why foreign startups rarely win. Here is one thing. That's the broken trust circle. And this is roughly how we operate with most competitions. Some of them do not go the entire way. Some of them have other steps, but this is roughly how it works. So you do a basic application. We sort them into good quality startups or poor quality startups, looking at certain criteria. We give them usually improvement suggestions. So we will give you suggestions on this is what you should do with your slide deck. And then if you do these things and implement them, we continue working with you. If you do not work on this and you just send us the same pitch deck or you do not respond, then we do not work with you. So then we're here. Then usually we do a sanity check. So we've done that in the past a little bit later. Now we do this a little bit earlier. So we ask you, what do you want to win? What do you expect to get out of this competition? And when you have suitable expectations, so let's say you are an A-round startup, you have 5 million in funding and 3 million in revenue, and you say you are fine landing with 200,000 RMB, then we definitely will work with you. But if you have no revenue, one person founder and no funding, are just an MVP stage, but you want to win 2 million RMB, then we stop. So this is where we do a little bit of quality filtering. So then usually the next step is we prepare for the first pitch at a competition. There we also lose a lot of startups, and we keep track of this, by the way, because many of them do not show up. Sometimes Chinese competitions are messy as hell because the people trying to reach out to you getting a pitch slot on something, they do not know how to do calendar invites and things like this. So then that could be one of the reasons. But the other one is that the people are not organized, and we cannot work with disorganized founders. And this is actually a big proportion of the founders that we work with. So you see already here, 70% of the startups drop until here. So all these points that you see here. Then we have 2 lines, do not progress into the next round. That's fine. We still want to work with you because we have identified you as a good startup, or you progress into the next and final round. But that's not the end here yet. There's actually where we do an interview usually with you, and we go through the steps of when are you going to land? How are you going to land? What are you going to do? How much are you going to invest? How are you going to do X, Y, Z? So we ask you a lot of things. And if we have a certain percentage of doubt, we usually give a recommendation to the organizers that there is a risk that you might not land if you win. This is not in all the competitions that this kind of recommendation goes through, but in most of the good ones that we work with, this actually is important because one thing that Chinese competitions want is a certainty of a winner lands. They had too many startups in the past, especially foreign startups that won a prize 1 million or 2 million RMB, but then they didn't win. They didn't land. And this is bad for them. And they are all improving on this by getting confirmation of the referrers of they will land. So then we give a recommendation. Then actually is decided if you win a prize and at what certainty you get what kind of prize. There are a few competitions that give just by points, but most of them have certain negotiation levels in between where it is looked at, okay, we have 3 startups in robotic manufacturing. One of them has 90 points, 189, 187. And then they are looking into details and negotiate a little bit. Okay, this one has better chances. So they're trying to get there the better startups up. I see there. So one of the big things lets people drop, not just from our side, but we are also good at detecting this, by the way. Some of the red flags that we're looking for and that you have to be very careful about is false data. What do I mean by false data? It means you say you have a client, let's say you're from Italy and you have a client, the largest semiconductor company paying you $50,000 a year. If you come into due diligence, because competitions have that, they might ask, can you show me the contract? And if you cannot prove that there is a contract, then it's false data and you're out. And this happens way more often than people think. It's about educational background. You say you have a master, but you have not graduated yet. You say you have a client, but it's actually like just an NDA or an LOI. These things, be extremely careful about. So everything that you have should be true. One thing that does not have to be true is projections. So if you say you will invest 300,000 RMB in 2026 into the Chinese market, that is projection. Nobody can pin you down on that, but that's a good thing that you can say. Anything historic should be true, right? So be careful. So one thing I mentioned regarding unresponsiveness, usually Chinese competitions try a lot to reach you. They write you on WhatsApp, they give you calls, they write you emails, they write you on LinkedIn, they do a lot of things. One thing we learned is if we cannot catch you with a simple email, we will most likely not work with you because we had too much experience with people that we chased on LinkedIn, we chased on WhatsApp, we gave them calls, and then in the finals they got a prize and they just vanish. And that happens very often. And usually the tendency is once they are unresponsive, it's a pattern already. And we stop working with you if you're unresponsive. Chinese are a little bit more persistent, but just that you know this is a big no-no. Uncommitted. So some startups that apply, they say, oh, I actually don't want to land here. I just want to participate in a competition. That's no-go. So you need to be committed. You should know why you want to be here and how you want to be here. This commitment is a no-brainer. You should be interested in the market. There are many markets you can expand to. You can go to Korea, to Europe, to Japan,
to India, but you should have a strong reason. China is the same. When you don't have a reason, then what are you doing here? Then the change of story is also something we usually detect when we hear you're not looking at Beijing anymore, you're looking now at Hong Kong, or the person in charge has changed, and now we want to put this person in place. So if things in the story change, we also become very, very alert, because this is usually a sign that this will not last. This is a very simple overview. I have a few examples in the next couple of slides. I think one thing that I saw in many of the applications recently is you don't have baseline application. You have a lot of AI generated images but no clear structure. And actually the baseline structure is always intro, problem, solution, revenue, clients, competitors, team. Done. That's everything you need for international competitions. Nothing else. For China, you need to add a few more things, which is patents and certificates, China market entry plan, city focus slides. So if you plan to participate in a Shanghai competition, you should have Shanghai there. And how are you going to land? China traction, what I just mentioned, having images, certificates. That can be of virtual calls, that can be of letter of intents, that can be of anything. A lot of things. Usually this is pictures or a few numbers, the pictures with Chinese. Here, the basic slides. One recommendation I also can give you is do control F for China. And I promise you 90% of all the startups I work with, they have not even mentioned in any of these slides China. That's not good. So your problem should also have the main problem of your business. And then what does it mean for China? Is there a problem in China that you're trying to solve? What's the solution in China? And so on and so on. And this is, most people forget that. That's also for the team, for example. If you have Chinese team members, you should have them mentioned there, even if they're an intern or something like this. 2 slides. That should not be there. You can leave the contact there, that's fine, but better remove it, because usually the organizers will ask you to remove it at one point, because they don't want that people catch you away. But the one thing I am allergic to is raising money. If you come to competitions to raise money, you're at the wrong place. You come to the competition to showcase you're the best in a certain segment, and you should win a prize. You should not ask for money. That's the wrong place. This is usually, for me personally, a no, if there is a raising money slide. So 10 to 12 slides. If you have more, try to keep it less. Also, think about it. One of the largest competitions we work with, they have 11,000 applications every year. The judges have to look at 50 to 100 applications, and some of them are not professional in the first round. So they get tired. They cannot look at so much stuff. Keep it simple. Keep it ideally bilingual. So if you can, run it through Google Translate or get Ryan on your side to help to make your headlines bilingual. And make it as simple as possible, because there are just so many applications. Here are some simple slides, improvement suggestions, clients. A simple thing. So here are some examples of startups that won. Most of them won probably $1 million RMB or something more. You should bring Chinese clients first. So if you have a lot of clients here, and that was the slide after I gave them the recommendation, Neo was like on the bottom right, and I told them first focus, top left. So if you have Chinese clients, put them in the focus. Then also here, they have Hong Kong and mainland China on the right, should be on the top left. Singapore is not focused, right? They're a Singaporean company. That's why they have Singapore there. But you should have mainland China. Actually, you could remove everything else and just have mainland China and Hong Kong, and that would be good. This one, they differentiate actually between paying customers, commitments, and who they want to target. And this is, so the commitments are a letter of intent. And I think most of you can reach out to companies and say, if we come to China, would you want to work with us? And that's a letter of intent, right? And then you can put the logos here. Or propose, that could be, that are your target companies. So if you never had anything, but you want to work with ICBC or HSBC in Hong Kong, let's say you want to enter through Hong Kong, then you should put that here. Why? So you even can have targets mentioned there. But not having anything there is bad. The team. As I mentioned, team is one of the main pillars where everything decides if you get through or not. There is a lot of suggestions I can give, but this is usually individualized. So I just show you some random things. A good one where they combined it with patents, right? So they say our team invented 500 plus patents. That's great. And they have the universities here, Chicago booth. So if you're in one of the global top 100 universities, you should definitely also mention that. But having the university there is important. And let's say, wait, I have another slide for that. This one is great. They are very qualified people, but they don't have a university logo there. And they have good universities. So that's a bad thing. You need to put that there. Because sometimes there are professors, they want to say, okay, I maybe know Bayer or Lanxess or something like this, but I know Oxford, definitely. So you should have that there, right? University is one of the main things you should have. If you do not have a master degree, you have a bachelor degree, if you're below, you can actually forget it, getting a prize, then you should have a different application. But if you have a bachelor, there are certain ways how you can present yourself in a way to still get through, but just later in the winning chances could be that there are some questions rising. But we had some cases where startups had only a bachelor founder, but we helped them to present themselves that they get better results in the team section and the presenter. This one is good. Diversity. This one, they have a Chinese team member, an extremely qualified one, who would do all the China work, but this person was not mentioned here on the slide because they thought they only need to show the co-founders. But if you have a person, and may it be an intern, put a Chinese face there. And I promise you, all the judges give you 2 or 3 points more just because they see a Chinese face in the team. That's also a hint for you. You can, I will say more about that later, but you can get a Chinese intern. I'm pretty sure there are also at Hyderabad, at universities, certain Chinese interns or Chinese students. Hire them and get them in your team. And with that, you have a Chinese face. And you learn about the culture and the language. The China slide. I cannot recommend you to write about China has a huge market and there is a big opportunity and the market is XYZ $1 million big or $1 billion big. That is not a China plan. This is also not a big why. What you need is how are you going to look at China and how are you going to start? Nobody wants to know that the market is big because everybody knows the market is big, unless you can say very specific things. We had a fintech startup, for example, that was also working on the payment fractions that dropped in e-commerce because Stripe or similar companies were detecting that this could be fraudulent. But they looked at the fraudulent data and looked at, okay, these 30% can actually still go through. And then they look, this is a specific problem for the Chinese market because they want to sell outside. They use this and they want to earn, of course, more money. And that's how we're going to do it. And then they had very specific numbers on how many e-commerce companies there are in China and blah, blah, blah. And that made sense. But just bringing a big number without the analysis and the reason why, it's not a good story. So here, what you see is they have a good story of where they manufactured, where they want to go, how they want to do things. And this is very good. By the way, one important thing, make sure the China map is correct from a China perspective. So the demarcation line here and Taiwan included, very important. If you don't have that, at one round or another, you will most likely drop as well. Here is a little bit of historic plus roadmap ahead, and they had here in parallel, and once they will start building on China. So you can keep it simple with like 2 or 3 lines. But again, here they mentioned Beijing and getting first clients and doing R&D and so on and so on. We gave them more recommendations and they implemented all of this. I don't have the newest slide now, but this is already a good thing. The city market entry slide. Sometimes I see that people have a Shanghai slide for Beijing because they apply to certain competitions, but you need to do it every time. And you, for the right city or the right district, you should write down very clearly how are you going to enter and when, and who are you going to hire and how much money are you going to spend. So what I said about we're going to dedicate 300,000 RMB in the first year, and we're going to register a company in Q2 of next year and going to hire the founder who's going to spend 3 or 4 months then in China. That should be a plan written there, and not in terms of we're going to hire an agency, we're going to hire talent, and we will see if once we have clients, we will register. That's too vague. You need to be specific. And these specifics, nobody will pin you down on. So if you say you register in Q2 next year, but you don't register then yet, maybe you register in Q1 the following year, it doesn't matter. The way how you phrase it also makes people understand how much you understand about corporate movement and market entry strategy. And this is an important lesson for many of you to exercise this through and write a good plan. Patents. Yeah, this is one of the slides. They have actually the patent numbers here. They have pictures of what they do. And just write that you have patents registered and how many are pending and so on and so on. This is important. If you don't have IP, doesn't matter. Financials. I see too often that people now would send me slides of revenue projections 2026 to 2030 or 2030, sorry. And it's not based on anything. So you should have 2024, 2025, maybe 2023 of actual numbers. And if it's 0, it doesn't matter. But if you have first month or something of the year already a few thousand of revenue, put it in. And you should have actual numbers. And then do maximum 2 years of projection, not more. Everything else is crazy. Ideally, put also the funding numbers, how much money you have raised combined. So if you had an angel, a pre-seed, and a seed round, combine the amount and calculate it into RMB. So you have USD and RMB that they can choose which number to read. Please be careful to double check these numbers because Chinese is similar like core in India. There are very odd ways of having numbers. So you have the funding round. So if you are A round, write it there. So this is one of the things that startups often forget. Write the funding round down. And also put the logos there of the investors that invested into you. So here are some of the activities that I would recommend all of you to try to get to. Number one, if in any way possible, and you have not done that yet, come to China. There are many places in China, less expensive, very expensive places. But no matter what, if you can, try to come to China, take a lot of pictures with a lot of people, a lot of companies, and put that on your slide. Try to get meetings for clients and learn about the market as much as you can. We also do tours, by the way. We do tailored support for founders. So if you want to come for a week or something and you want to meet clients or have a first market access, we also support there, but you can also come by yourself. The next one is hire a Chinese. As I said, the easiest is get an intern wherever you are from. So if you're in Italy, go to the next university, hire an intern there, because sometimes companies also do not know if China is really for them. But once they have the first engagement with a person from the country, you develop understandings regarding culture, language, business, communication, and this is critical. And they can help you to also a Chinese angle to your company. Yeah, better chances of winning. If you have foreigners that can act local, you also need to do that. If you have team members who are married to Chinese, that's also a good thing that you can write down there. For example, one of the startups that got like one of the highest winning prices that we supported, the CFO was married to a Chinese. That was an important information that they have already the cultural like connectedness where this person China is from. And this person also supported in some of the translation for the slides and so on and so on. So this is important. Also soft things like that. By the way, for those foreigners who are in China and try to pitch here, one of the main things that usually happens, they don't trust that you stay here. So if you then bring up you have a Chinese spouse or something, that is a guarantee that you usually will stay here. For example, one of my friends, he's from Spain. He's married to a Chinese, fluent in Chinese. And he said every time he was pitching to investors, I'm married to a Chinese, I want to stay here. That's important to say.
One of the few things you can also do is do deep research on Chinese market. Target companies or target markets. You should do some desk research on who you would want to target and why. Where are they based? Who are people that you can talk to? If you have a slide like this, at least it means that you've done your homework. This is the easiest one. Doesn't cost money, just time. And also us, we see if you really do your homework. Because if there are certain names that we are not familiar with, but they have Chinese characters or anything, we know that you've done your work. And this is a good sign. And then the other one, attend events in your home country. And this is actually, we do that strategically for all the startups where we would bet our last shirt that they would win something. We tell them, we do research on, there's an event going on in your city and there is a mayor or vice mayor or a government official coming. You need to be there and you need to get a picture with them. And you need to talk to them because that will increase your chances massively. And these pictures, if you ever have a government official that you met somewhere, it will give you a lot of points. So we prepare the best startups that we work with to do exactly that. And most of them have not been to China before, and it works. One recommendation I want to give you on the way, if you go into the Chinese market and you work with organizations like us that refer and help you to get to startup competitions, check with them what their traction is. And I can promise you, most of them have never, ever had any foreign startup or a foreign-faced founder winning and claiming anything in China. And that is extremely important because you want to work with people who have done it before. We have done like countless of founders. Here are some of the results. Like one startup from Italy, from Dubai, one from US, American founder in China, a German founder. This is just from one session that we did, but we have actually many. And we can talk about the cases, why they won, why they did not land, why they landed, how they landed, what they claimed, how they claimed, what the processes are like. So we can talk about all of this. And if you just work with, I don't know, a random scout, they don't know how all of this works. And I can promise you the competition itself is probably 30% of the work. Because if you're serious about China and you want to commit to the market and enter it, there is way more in between where you can negotiate more out of a competition than just the price. You can get grants, you can get client introductions, you can get investors, you can get a lot of more resources. And that's where we are usually involved in as well to help you negotiate on the way to get understood by the partners that you're working with. That's something that other organizations usually cannot give you. But we also wrote blogs. So sometimes the startup on the left, for example, there were certain things where they said, we're going to drop this. We're not going to do it anymore because they had cultural misunderstandings. But we came in and we solved them because it was not as they thought. So we explained to them why certain things are in a certain way. And then they still got through and got a really good winning price. And this is an important factor as well. This is something, I mean, we work with many cities in China and globally, but this one I want to mention to you, there are also certain things beyond competitions that could make sense for earlier stage startups. So startups that are below the good startup definition that I gave you before, where you have maybe good talent or a good MVP, or you have not raised much money yet, you can still utilize the Chinese market because they can give you free office space, housing support, pilot money, investment, a lot of extra benefits that you can get. And that's just an example of Chaoyang. There are other districts in China that do the same. If you are early and you are serious about China, then let us talk about this and see if we can get you this instead of competition prices, or both can also be the thing. Because sometimes what they do is they look at, are you entering a program like this first? Then you get a competition winning price later because they want to also nurture their own startups in a certain way, right? And there are a lot of more resources than just startup competition prizes. And the chances of winning and getting through are very slim. If you do it by yourself, it's nearly impossible. But even working with us, the chances are slim to get through. Nonetheless, I think that startup competitions are a good way to get extra cash, like a cherry on the top. But these things here are actually way more important than the competition prices.